Where did you learn artificial resuscitation? French class, kid. Oh, French class.
Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys. Hey, you guys.
I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the Hey You Guys podcast. This week we are looking back at Joe Johnston's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, a movie that hasn't necessarily lived on in the public consciousness, but when I was a kid, briefly felt like the biggest movie in the world. Rob, was it the same for you, or was this a specifically roast-based phenomenon? Because I don't feel like it's a movie people necessarily talk about anymore, but in 1989, this felt as big as Home Alone did in 1990, as big as Jurassic Park did in 1993. Briefly, this felt legitimately to me like one of the biggest movies of all time, and I know it did well, but it just feels like it's kind of fallen off the face of the earth in some respects.
Well, I mean, you totally hit the nail on the head, right? Because I didn't watch this film when I was younger.
Oh, maybe it was a growth-based phenomenon.
Yeah, I've seen it once before.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I wanted to ask you, right? So I've seen it once before. I did see it when I was a kid. I can't, sometime in the 90s. I've said the story many, many times about my mum bringing films home from the video shop. So it's one of those occurrences. It came home, fine, I watched it, I moved on. I watched it again this week with my wife, and I asked my wife the same question. Is this actually a good film? Or is it just the effects? Like, the effects, I think, still hold up. The whole shrinking thing, the whole we're moving through a jungle that's our back garden, and we'll get into all of that. But really, is it a good film? Is it good acting? I'm not too sure.
I think this is going to be tricky because for a kid of, you know, my age when I watched it when I was like 7, 8 years old, this was a fantastic movie. I don't think it's great in the same way that Home Alone is. Like, Home Alone was great when you were 8 years old. Yeah. And then you rewatch it now and go, oh yeah, this is a brilliant movie. You know, Macaulay Culkin is legitimately fantastic. Joe Pesci is legitimately brilliant. I don't think anyone's necessarily fantastic in this. And even Rick Moranis, who, you know, was at the peak of his fame at this point, but obviously disappeared from the scene pretty much very soon after this anyway, or certainly soon after the sequels. I don't think anyone's necessarily brilliant in the same way. I don't think the kids are necessarily fantastic, but I like them all, except for, of course, one of them, you know, the cap-wearing douchebag. But, you know, he's supposed to be an asshole. He's a little bit broad for my taste. But when I go back and watch the film...
Can I say as well, what you just mentioned, like fuck is that kid 12 as well. That kid is 30 if he's a day.
Well, there's a few things with age in this film. I mean, the biggest issue is Matt Frewer as Russell Sr. Like, you know, I guess the fact that he looks about 50 helps, but he was only 30 years old when he made this film, which is insane. Dude,
he's only 30.
He's only 14 years older than Russell Jr. in this film. It's bonkers. The two things that stood out to me at the start of this film, and sorry, I will get to a much more pertinent question in a moment, is one, the fact that he was only 30 years old, which is insane. Yeah. And two, the fact that I had never noticed growing up. I was like, wait a minute, this is like Jim Carrey. I was like, this is unbelievable how similar his performance, right down to when he does the fish head stuff. It's like he sounds like Jim Carrey. He looks like Jim Carrey. His mannerisms are like Jim Carrey. And I checked up online, and some people have suggested that Jim Carrey based his performance on screen based on Matt Frewer. And in particular, Matt Frewer before this was Max Headroom.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you remember. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, Jim Carrey's just doing a Max Headroom impression. He's not doing a Max Headroom impression. He's doing a Matt Frewer impression. I'm not sure if you noted it, and if it's one of those things because I've seen it a million times and I'm looking out for like additional details. But I found it both distracting and like I legitimately couldn't believe I had noticed before. Like once you see it, you cannot unsee the fact that Matt Frewer, it's insane the fact that he's 30. Again, the hairline and stuff like that helps, but the fact that he is so much like Jim Carrey in this film.
I didn't crack the Jim Carrey code like you. I mean, to be fair, yes, I see it now as you've mentioned it, but because I've only ever seen this film once, I was just trying to look at it again through a child's eyes, but unfortunately, I'm looking at it through an adult's eyes. And like I said, Ron Thompson is just a complete and utter asshole, and that kid is 30 if he's a day.
He's the worst character in the film, for sure.
And Russ Jr., Little Russ Thompson, whatever his name was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to see the Gozer from Ghostbusters was able to get another film.
It's weird you say that, because when I watched it, all I saw was the progenitor for Steve from Stranger Things.
Yeah.
You know, he's got like the big hair. he's the older kid, kind of like the reluctant hero. He's not obviously as cool as Steve was in Stranger Things, but he had the same vibe. But again, it's coming at the film from a different direction, because again, really to stress this, I find it almost bizarre that you only saw this once as a kid, because my friends and I, it felt like this was one of the movies. Again, like I put it in that company alongside Home Alone and Jurassic Park and stuff, because not only was it a massive deal at the cinema, but it became this big VHS thing. Like, it felt like a movie we all watched a million times. And even though I hadn't seen it for, I would say, well over 15, 20 years, going back to it, I was like, I know this film beat for beat. I just know everything about it.
I had an infinite amount of time, and I had Tremors sequels to watch. You know, I couldn't always just watch Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
You've got so many straight to DVD sequels to watch, of course. But well, that's the thing. I wasn't into all the bizarre thing we'll get to soon is the fact that, despite the fact Rob has only watched this once, he's watched all the sequels and all the TV shows, because Rob is a fucking psycho. It's insane. But no, it's weird, because obviously I was watching this when I was 7, 8 years old, and I remember thinking Russell Thompson was really cool.
Really?
Like, I'm not sure if it was like the look. I really did. Like, I look back now and I'm like, well, I don't think he is particularly cool. He has his moments.
He's a peeping Tom, I can tell you that much.
He is a bit, but I can get it, because, again, coming back from when I was a kid, I had a massive crush on Amy Zielinski.
Oh, massive Amy Zielinski, I can definitely see that crush. I appreciate that. I can definitely see that crush. But do they really need to show him being a peeping Tom? I mean, he wasn't even subtle about it.
Yeah, but he was like 12, 13. Like, she is dancing 16, in the kitchen. What's that?
Same age as her, 16.
Yeah, which is totally fine. Like, dude, if you were 16 and you walk past, a girl's house and she was smoking hot and she was dancing in the window, you'd probably look. Of course,
it never happened. Liam, it never happened. You can't prove a thing. It was deemed appropriate.
It was deemed, of course, but. I think the reason I was into the whole vibe thing is because one thing you don't really get is she is legitimately the girl next door, both literally and figuratively. Because usually if you get a movie and it's the girl next door ends up looking like Megan Fox, which there's no girl next door who looks like Megan Fox. Like, don't get me wrong, Amy Zielinski, Amy O'Neill, she's a very attractive girl, but she does legitimately look like a girl who could live next door. And I think that kind of added to it. It's like, how cool would it be if you a girl you fancy next door? I know, again, that all sounds very lame, but this is 8-year-old Liam speaking. And, there was nothing sexual about, I think around 8, 9 years old, you just kind of have that vague idea that you like girls, but you don't understand why at that age. So, of course, you're kind of approaching it in a very different way. But as to your initial question as to whether this film holds up, I think it largely does. I don't think it's a brilliant film, but what I think is it's a well put together film, a largely well acted, if not spectacularly acted. And like so many movies that we've gone back to in the 80s, it benefits so much from being a lean, 90 minutes long.
I was so shocked when I put it on and it was an hour and a half. And I thought, oh yeah, of course, it's an 80s film. Like so many films that we've made each other watch. I say made each other watch, like we sat each other down, you had to watch. So many films that we watched previously on this podcast lately have been closer to 2 hours. So the fact this was 90 minutes, I was like, oh, this is good. And don't get me wrong, the effects wise, it was great. It looked so, it still holds up now. I mean, the fact is Joe Johnston's first film does really well with it, but there's something I can't put my finger on it, whether it's the story, whether it's some of the acting. I don't know if objectively it is actually a good film.
Well, maybe that's why with, other than those who kind of grew up with it, it might be the reason that it hasn't lived on in the memory. Yeah, it hasn't been passed down. Like, a lot of these films, they get passed down generationally, don't they? Whereas a film like this, I don't hear kids who are like in their 20s or 30s maybe kind of talking about this in the same way. It's rarely you see stuff online where, other than people our age, mention this film again. And a big test for that will be they're on about Rick Moranis coming out of retirement to do a legacy sequel to this film. And obviously, we'll get to that in Legacy. But it'll be interesting to see how much of a big deal that is, because it will be bizarrely not for you because, you weren't really into this. But I think there's a lot of people who are my age who have a real attachment to this film. And a big part of it is what you said, if we kind of sidestep the whole idea of whether it's a fantastic movie or not. What it was, and what it remains to a certain extent, is a fantastic experience. Like, you really kind of underestimate or undersell just how impactful those special effects were in 1989.
I know.
And there's a reason. You already mentioned the fact that they hold up well. It's because, and it's something we've talked about in previous podcasts, the late 80s were peak physical effects. And this is just before, CG comes in. I know there had been a few CG shots, but when I think of like the real start of CG, I think of 1991 in T2, and I think of 1993 in Jurassic Park. And obviously this is just before this, and they lean massively into physical effects and obviously huge sprawling sets, which I'm sure aren't as big as they appear in the film.
So when it's the physical effects, it looks great. You can see that it kind of becomes a little bit when they come face to face with the Bumblebee.
Yeah, well, they start
come face to face
using miniatures occasionally. That's when it looks a bit ropey.
Yeah, but otherwise, it looks great. Like everything, traveling through the jungle at the back garden, it all looks fantastic. It all looks like, and I like the line as well. They go, "Why is there a river in your back garden?" That could be dog pee, but to us, it's it does make sense. Everything is just, it's like borrower territory at that point, where everything is. And you can just relate to it. Sorry?
Well, not relate to it because it's happened, but that kind of, that kid's adventure thing. It's like, you can totally imagine that idea of being shrunk in your back garden and suddenly having to get home. It's the same way that, I've mentioned it with horror films. The ones I find most effective are the ones you can relate to. Not that I've ever been haunted, but stuff like Paranormal Activity, because you see it and it's just in a bedroom. I'm like, fuck, I have a bedroom. I can, I've got a wife. I can imagine her getting up and just standing at the end of the bed, staring at me for 3 hours like a creepy bitch. It's all things that theoretically in my mind could happen. And it's the same with this. Of course, that it's ridiculous sci-fi. But from a kid's point of view, you watch it like, oh, imagine what it would be like if we were all shrunk and stuck at the end of the garden and we had to make it back and it was like a jungle. That is exactly the reason it was so impactful when I was 8 years old. And again, those physical effects, because it's sets, they still look so good. And, again, like we're kind of talking about whether it aged well. This film did, factually do really well. I mean, it made $222 million back in 1989.
2 sequels, a TV show. It made, it moved. Oh, don't get me wrong, it moved on. And just because I'm there saying, was it objectively good? Obviously, it was, because it moved on. People enjoyed this film, but there's just
but there's a difference between, is it good and is it does it hold up? And that's one of the questions we are fundamentally asking with this podcast. Is and it's a tricky one sometimes because, and this is a perfect example where you don't have that attachment, but I clearly find it very hard to remove my nostalgic element from rewatching this film, because it was such a big part of my childhood and I've watched it so many times and I know it beat for beat. But when you try and remove that kind of, those rose-tinted glasses and watch it in 2022, is it a great movie? And I rewatched it, I was like, I don't think it is. I still enjoy it, but I think you are right. I think it's a good film. I don't think it's a fantastic movie because that visual impact is obviously lost.
One of my biggest points as well is they concentrated a lot on, okay, they've been shrank. They're this size. This is the adventure they're on now. We don't have to worry about anything else. Because explain to me, Liam, okay, how the machine worked by being hit with a baseball.
The science is a little bit questionable in this film.
There is no science. That's what I'm saying. The baseball hit it. He's then blowing up fruit at the end of the film, again, in front of the families. Yeah. And then they do the little charades thing, and they go, oh, it was the baseball. And he goes, oh, it was the baseball hit it. Okay, now I know. Thanks, Nick. Wait, what?
Oh, of course. What? Of course, a baseball. Let's be clear. Zelensky isn't the best scientist in the world. At the start of the film, this is as much about long-suffering wives as it is science. What it reminds me of is the Peltzer family in Gremlins. You've got this guy who's dragging his poor family along for the ride, and they're just like, oh, God, okay, try and make your shrink machine. Yes, all you're doing basically is blowing up an Apple's machine. That's all he's created. Yeah. But then the more concerning aspect of this film, beyond the fact that obviously he puts himself ahead of his family, is his complete lack of a scientific approach to, one, finding his kids once he realizes they're shrunk. There's nothing scientific about his approach. It's very clumsy. He could have quite easily stepped and killed on all those kids. But then two, once he does, as you say, have his eureka moment with the baseball, there's no test period. Yes, they test it on Russ Sr. first, but he does why don't you test it on an inanimate object first? Why didn't you test it on another fucking apple?
Literally blowing up apples. How about you get another apple?
No, fuck that. The baseball's there. Let's go straight to human trials. Well, if Russ Senior had been,
I'm pretty sure Russ Senior kind of deserved it, because what kind of douchebag flicks your cigarette into your neighbour's garden?
It's a dick move. It's a dick move.
That is I appreciate our plot point. Now they've got some fire. Great. But, oh my God, it was just such a, like I said, a douchebag move. Just what a prick to do that.
Yeah, well, that is the thing. Like, his family, like Russell, like, you know, I do, as I say, growing up, I thought Russell Jr. was quite cool. But Russell Sr. and his son, Rusty, is it the other one? Ron, sorry, no, Rusty is Russell, who's got 1,000,001 names. Ron. They're just the worst. And not only that, what's truly unforgivable is the way that they wear caps. Those are two of the worst caps in movie history. And, you know, I'm a big fan of caps. And I'm just like, guys, what the fuck? You are just the worst dress. And Rusty's such a fucking brown noser with his old man. It's just like, oh my God.
Ron,
both
again,
little
Ron.
Republicans. Ron. Jesus Christ.
Who's calling their kid Ron, by the way?
Ron and Russell, oh God, yeah, and Russell Jr. Like, yeah, they're dicks. I mean, obviously, Russell takes after his mother, his long-suffering mother, God bless her. And it is amazing how much the mothers put up with their husbands in this film. But as I said, it's a trope of the 80s. It was exactly the same with the Pelters and Gremlins, where the mother is clearly at a wit's end, especially like, oh, well, you know, your father's your father, and he wants to make it. And it's like, Jesus Christ, just divorce him. This guy's a psychopath.
Russell and Ron's mother, that's Buffy's mum, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Okay. I thought it was.
Well, there's a few little low-key things in terms of casting in this film. Like, bizarrely, Kimmy Robertson is...
Gloria Foster.
Yeah, she's Lucy from Twin Peaks.
Yes.
And it took me a moment. I was like, oh, who is that? And then, of course, you hear the voice, and you're like, oh, it's Lucy from Twin Peaks. Of course it's Lucy. You can't mistake that voice.
But it's the same with Don as well, because Don is in fucking... Pretty much. He was the doctor in Inner Space. He's in like Arachnophobia. Yeah. He's been in loads as well. Well,
as I said, I quite like the cast. Although I am surprised going back and rewatching it, because of course, when you think of this film, I think most people think of Rick Moranis. You know, he's big part of the poster, and you know, again, coming off his run at the time. And what were the other films he was doing? You know, Ghostbusters, Little Shop of Horrors, Parenthood, Spaceballs. These were all big movies, and he's all over the poster. But then you rewatch it, and you realize it really is the kids' movie. You know, he's in it for sure, but he's not in a huge amount.
No, he's the selling... Well, to be fair, he is the selling point. But we'll cover it in fact. He was, like, down on the list to play this guy as well. There was
Which seems insane.
Before him. Yeah.
Because he's become so synonymous. Like, you could make the argument that when most people, again, it might not be you because you haven't got the attachment, but I think most people, when they think of Rick Moranis now, think of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And a part of that is obviously he did the sequel as well. Yeah. But, I mean... You know, he wasn't the lead in Ghostbusters. I'm not convinced Spaceballs has aged particularly. You know, I still love Spaceballs. I don't think anyone's rewatched it.
Although it's been a while since I've seen it.
One, it's been a while. There's some good stuff in it, but I don't think people are necessarily still talking about Spaceballs. I don't think there's any danger of a Spaceballs 2 popping up starring Darth Helmet. And Little Shop of Horrors now isn't. I know it's got its fans, but it's a long ass time ago. So I think most people, when they think of Rick Moranis, I think the first film people will kind of mention, a lot of people, would be this.
Yeah. No,
totally. You know, which is fine. But as I said, like going back and rewatching it, I was like, he's not in it as much as I remember it. This is a movie about the kids. And other than Ron, I think they're all pretty good. I think they're all pretty good, especially, what's the Amy's brother called? Nick. Nick, I think, might be the MVP of this movie. Like, he delivers his, like, he's, you know, you think he's, 10 years old or whatever, 11 years old. Yeah. There are a lot of movies with a lot of very annoying 10, 11-year-olds. And Nick knocks it out of the park. And I think that's a reason why, again, going into legacy.
Nick is low-key cool, mind. It's really weird because he's got the glasses, he's got the lab coat. You think, he's a geek, he's probably getting bullied in school. But then just the way he talks, the way he acts, you realise, oh no, this guy is actually low-key pretty cool. He's probably quite popular in school. He's not getting bullied or anything like that. But then you see like Ron, the way Ron treats him and calls him a geek and all that. Ron had one of the best lines. Like, I think the guy's a shite bag completely. Mm-hmm. But he had one of the best lines. It actually made me laugh when I watched this the other day. When he hit the ball, which the magic ball that makes things shrink. into the window. And he goes, "It's not my fault. Why is their house so close?" Like, I don't know why.
That feels like the kind of dick thing you would say at that age.
It's a proper kid's move, isn't it? Like, and what was the other one he said? "It's summer. Your window should be open."
Yeah. He's just not having it at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's what I mean. He's a dickhead, but he's supposed to be a bit of a dickhead. And Nick actually feels like a much more modern character because he is a geek. And I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have a huge number of friends, but he also doesn't care. He's like completely comfortable in his skin.
Yeah.
The only thing is Nick is so nice that it makes his dad, Wayne Zielinski, look like more of a dick because he's such a great kid and he's remaking miniatures of his dad's work. He's clearly so interested in what he does, but he has just no interest in his son. I'm thinking Wayne is a terrible husband, a terrible father in many respects. Although he does have it tough because, let's be clear, he's on the kind of cusp of creating one of the most important scientific discoveries of the last 100 years. And everybody at the science conference just has no interest. Again, it's one of those things you get in 80s cinema where everyone's like, "Oh, you're a buffoon." And there's no reason for everyone to be so mean to him. But maybe he is a dick. I don't know.
Do you know what as well? I love the fact that they're trying to hint that he's an absent-minded guy.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not absent-minded. Like, they're going on, like, he's a scientist. And you've said it as well. He's just concentrating on himself. That's fine. There's the hint that he's missed breakfast and things like that. Oh, he's such an absent-mind. Don't forget this stuff when you go out. He comes home. He's remembered everything. He's remembered the shopping. He's remembered the dress. He's not absent-minded.
Maybe he is a good dad. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he just gets too into his work.
You want to go into parents? Right. Is it me?
What?
Or is Diane Zielinski a bit of a MILF?
She is quite hot. Like, again, Rick Moranis is not deserving of her at all. Although you do notice in the film her hair does keep changing colour. Supposedly, it's quite ginger at the start, and they asked her to lighten it up, but they didn't reshoot the earlier scenes. So she goes from like redheaded to auburn to quite blonde in the movie, and I'd never noticed it before. But yes, she is a bit of a MILF.
I was watching it going, where do I know her from? And it clicked. She was Nancy in the Tremors TV show.
Of course she was. There's this whole world of cinema I have no clue about where you can just pull names because you've seen all these wacky movies. I don't get it. But no, I mean, the thing is, the characters, the vast majority of them are paper thin. Yeah. But it's fine because the way this is shot, the way it's being directed, the way it's acted, it's all got a very 50s matinee feel. And I think that's one of the reasons that it's aged so well. There are references to the time for it being 1989. But for the most part, because it does have that matinee feel, it feels oddly timeless. And it's almost, the kind of, I don't want to say screen wipes, where the kind of camera comes in. It's almost cartoonish. But I think it gives the movie a timeless feel, like that, and obviously the special effects. But it does allow the characters, I think, to be a touch broader, and thus, which I think is important for a 90-minute film because these characters just don't have the time amongst all the kind of set pieces and everything to really kind of go, oh well, I'm that kind of character. So they need to be templates, like. Russ needs to be the kind of more emotional one. Ron needs to be a dickhead. Nick needs to be the geek. All those things, Amy needs to just be the girl next door. But I think they do enough in their performances to kind of flesh those out. But equally, I think a lot comes from Joe Johnston's directorial style, which, as you mentioned, unbelievably was his first film. What a confident movie to direct as your first film. I mean, the guy's gone on to have like a really weird kind of like, he's never quite hit the nail on the head.
Will you say what other films he did go on? I think maybe just after this one to direct one of my favorite films of the 90s.
Rocketeer.
Yes.
But that's the thing. Rocketeer is, I mean, I probably have the exact same relationship with Rocketeer that you have with this film, bizarrely. I watched it once when I was younger, probably a few years after it was released on VHS, and I don't think I've rewatched it since. And I remember liking it just fine, but I've just never seen it again. And I mean, when was it released? Like 91, 92, something like that?
91, yeah, I believe.
Yeah. And I've never gone back to it. So, I mean, that's prime Hey You Guys fodder right there. It's a film we really should be going back and rewatching. But the thing is, Rocketeer, again, I know it's a movie that's got its fans, but it wasn't a massive hit. Jumanji, very good. No, Jumanji was a massive hit, in fairness. Jurassic Park 3, whatever. Hidalgo, a very bizarre movie. The Wolfman, again, a strange choice, and I'm not sure what the legacy of that film really is. Captain America, a successful film, but I think the fact that he directed it gets lost is the case. It's just another Marvel film. But obviously people still rate him because he's doing the Chronicles of Narnia reboot, the Silver Chair.
Oh,
so people still hold him in high regard. And as I said, when you go back and you look at all those films, the one thing that comes out, and it may feel like faint praise, but they're all competent. I'm not sure if any of them are genuinely fantastic, and the same I think could be said of this, but they're all really competent films. Like, what's his name? Like the lesser version of Ron Howard almost. Yeah. He's got that little bit of flair. He's a safe pair of hands, but he's unlikely to make all that many films that are necessarily, which is maybe a bit unfair on Ron Howard because he is a more successful director.
They're effects laden. Most of those films that you've said as well, they're effects laden. So that's his niche. That he's able to direct something that not many people have done before. Like, I know we've had, I'm going to shrink you down and put you into a body, or I'm going to shrink you. But this, on a wider scale, nobody's done this before, where they've traveled and obviously the whole shrinking thing, and just like when they're going up, when they're holding onto the dog or they're flying on the bumblebee, things like that. It looks, still to this day, looks really good. Now, do you know what you said? You said something earlier on about the fact that it becomes a kid's film. It feels like a kid's film. Rick Moranis is in the background. I read somewhere, right, that I thought, watching it as an adult now, as a near 40-year-old, might have given it more gravitas. There was initially going to be 5 kids.
Okay.
And that extra kid was actually the cannon fodder. He was going to die during the sprinkler debacle. Yeah. I thought that, like I said, that would have given it more gravitas. That would have just given it more of an oomph in feelings. And you think then, do they drag this body around? Do they leave? So is there some sort of decaying, shrunk body that they're never going to find in the garden? Or is there a scene at the end where they actually make him big and which is a bit morbid as well? Let's find him.
Super morbid. Yeah. I think, like, again, that whole, to bring it back to the point that this feels like a 50s matinee movie, I'm glad that they didn't have the dead kid. This isn't fucking Stand By Me. We don't, and again, even if they just kind of leave the body, you do start thinking, you go down that route, like, wait, do they go back to search for this tiny body? Do they kind of resize the decaying corpse? And then it's all far too disturbing. But I think there's plenty
of a whole different meaning to them having Thanksgiving at the end of the film, doesn't it? Like, let's celebrate. God. There's a dead body still in the back garden. It's fine.
Yeah, do you have like an extra scene where it's like Nick goes, "Oh, I get it, French class." Yeah. Oh no, Steve! Oh, we forgot about Steve.
I can't believe we killed Steve.
Yeah, I'm not sure that scene is needed. So I think the sequence with Amy, where they think Amy's dead, where she falls down and she's like potentially drowned, I think that's more than impactful enough, and they're able to kind of add that likeness there. The quote from the top of the podcast about French kissing and stuff, which bizarrely, because I was looking for that quote online, the where did you learn artificial resuscitation, which is a strange term. I don't think we use in the UK artificial resuscitation, but the term where he responds as a French class kid. It appears that this went over the head of half of the known world, because there are grown-ups writing back like, what is the deal with the French class? I thought French kissing was a universal term, but apparently it's not.
We don't really use French. We only know French kissing from America, from America.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
We don't use the word French kissing.
Well, I mean, I still knew what it meant, the joke, even when I was younger.
You knew what it meant, but you never grew up going, did you French that girl? I mean, we had a terrible word for it in Cardiff.
Oh, copping off.
Yeah.
It was even worse in Scotland. Well, I'm not going to throw all of Scotland in the bus, but the East Coast, Edinburgh, they use the term bagging aff, which sounds, it sounds like sexual abuse, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, you're bagging aff. I'm like, oh, bagging aff. That sounds closer to like teabagging than kissing.
I don't get the bagging, but what's the aff?
Well, aff is just off. So bagging.
Okay,
like,
sorry.
So we say copping
off.
We said copping on, I think.
We had copping off. Did you cop off with her?
Did you cop off or cop on? I think you could use both.
And Newport,
which is quite bizarre. Cop off and cop on.
Newport, which is the city next to Cardiff.
Which is gross as well.
They had
what?
cob.
Cobbing off.
Cob off.
They're all gross. Although, in fairness, for this film, if ever somebody was on screen bagging ass, it was little Russ Thompson. Because there's a scene where, again, up until this point, you're like, oh, well, little Russ Thompson, he's like quite a sweet kid, seems quite intelligent, quite emotional. And there's a scene with Mrs. Zielinski when she's on the porch, and she's like, I'm very worried about little Russ Thompson and Amy being stuck out there in, obviously what are the woods to them, but the garden. When they kiss, there is a reason that her mother was concerned. Dude, that was not their first kiss. They are fucking going for it. That is an aggressive kiss for 16-year-old kids.
Thank you for bringing up the kiss as well, because were their younger siblings spying on them?
Yeah. They would like up above them watch it, which again isn't unthinkable. You're like, ooh, but Russ is kissing Amy and stuff. But then I think if you're 11, you look down and go, oh, Jesus Christ, Russ is really kissing Amy. I think he's going to swallow her.
Because my wife turned around to me and she said, oh, no, they were sleeping. I said, there's no way they were sleeping because they saw the scorpion first and screamed. They were perving out on those two getting off of each other.
They definitely were. They definitely were. Which brings us a good point too that I guess we've not really mentioned the set pieces in this film, and I'm still not convinced about the a scorpion being in the garden. I mean, I'm not sure if that makes sense in America, but whatever. But I think the most amazing thing that they did in this film is they made an ant likable, and a gross ant at that. They don't kind of cute it up. It's a pretty grim looking ant. I mean, they say it's a baby ant, which it isn't a baby ant because a baby ant would be a baby ant
would be a maggot.
Yeah.
Or a larva stage.
Or a larva stage, so that makes no sense. But I guess they had to have, because the ant was already pretty gross, they're trying to pass the ant off as like a pet. So you've got to have something grosser fighting the ant. So by the end of the film, when ant, again, we mentioned Amy almost drowning as being one of the more kind of emotionally impactful films. They make you legitimately care about an ant being killed in this film. When Auntie gets stabbed by the scorpion, I mean, you're already pulling your face. But again, as a kid, I was like, not Auntie. No, not Auntie. But you're the same guy who doesn't like fucking dogs in film. And I swear to God, if you tell me you don't like Quark in this film, you can go fuck yourself.
Quark was just used to... They got to the end of the film and they said, how are we going to get him up the steps? All right, no, let's get Quark, because that's the only way we're going to get him up those massive fucking steps.
We're already running into the whole Quark versus Quark thing. It is Quark, I think you are correct. Yeah. But you are incorrect on Quark is such a likable dog in this film. He's so cute. You're not having it. He's not having it. Fair enough. But all right, you mentioned earlier the fact that some of the special effects, as great as the sets all are, and they are fantastic, and they do a great job of selling you on the idea that these kids have been on a journey. I think that's one of the film's greatest successes is you believe the idea that they've gone from one end of the garden to the next and that it is truly a treacherous journey.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff with the bee, and as soon as they start using miniatures, that's when suddenly it starts looking a little bit like Jason and the Argonauts. That's like kind of the limit of physical effects, and where obviously CG did have the benefit.
I know, because that bee, as vibrant as it was, all of a sudden become very grey. Did you see that?
Yeah, it looked very great. Although I did ignore that when, again, speaks to Wayne Zielinski's just complete lack of a scientific approach to things. Who attacks a bee with a baseball bat? What's a fucking... I mean, don't get me wrong, I get it. Some people are scared of wasps or whatever. But to go... Was it a wasp or a bee?
It was a bumblebee.
It was a bumblebee. Yeah. One, you just let a bumblebee go, right? Yeah. Nobody attacks bumblebees. But to go after it with a baseball bat, I mean, again, speaks to the fact that he might be a bit of a psycho.
In 2022 now, where we get the whole the bees are dying out and we need the bees to survive thing, they'd be all over this film if he was going at it with a baseball bat.
I know. It just seemed a bit dramatic. But
it's a fly with a fucking Uzi, isn't it? It's not going to happen.
It kind of is, yeah. Or, to speak to last week's podcast when we did My Cousin Vinny, when he just kind of hears a sound in the night and just immediately comes out the front door shooting his gun and just into the night sky. It's like, dude, chill out, man. How about use your voice before you use bullets?
For his leather jacket on, by the way, just...
So ridiculous. Although this is another movie like My Cousin Vinny, which has a surprise appearance of a very cool pair of high tops. In this case, Rusty Thompson's high top Reeboks. Again, maybe one of the reasons I thought he was cool in 1989.
We're going to have Liam's... I know we have Liam's geography corner. We now need Liam's trainer section.
I think so. Well, I love late 80s, early 90s, basketball trainers. They're just a bomb. But it's amazing that, for all the big set pieces, you mentioned, despite the fact that nobody died, the scene with the sprinkler, you got the scene with the wasp, you got the scene with the ants and all that jazz. But the one that was most memorable for me was just the cookie. No, it was the cookie. It was just the fact that, one, it looked legitimately like a giant cookie. And when they started eating it, you can't, like, when you're 8 years old or 9 years old, however, I was 9 when this came out. Sorry, no, I was 7 when this came out. When I'm watching this film for the first time at that age and you see a giant cookie that is apparently edible, you're like, that is the coolest thing. It's the same way that at the end of Ghostbusters, one of the coolest things was, I watched it, I was like, oh, imagine you could eat all that marshmallow in that completely childish kind of way. Just the idea of having a giant cookie that you just eat until you exploded was unbelievable.
Watching it now as an adult, I'm thinking, oh, that's a bit gross, isn't it? How long's that been sat out there?
There is that element. Yeah. Although the cream just looked very appetizing.
Speaking of, what was the name of that cookie?
Oh, the oatmeal. Oh, what the hell was it called? Something oatmeal.
The oatmeal cream pies, you said.
Yes.
Which has a different connotation to me these days. I'm sorry.
Yes, cream pie does have a slightly dirtier connotation in your 40s. That is for damn sure. Or in your 30s. I don't want to throw you under the same bus that I am already under, for God's sake.
Give me 6 months and you can just, you can mock me as much as you want then.
But no, despite the name, those cookies did look very appetizing. Again, in that very American way, the kind of cookies you can find nowadays, but back in that time, I was like, oh, this cool American food. And now you've kind of, enlarged it to epic proportions. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Sure. But again, it's about capturing those moments that kids would find cool.
Yeah.
And when I was, you're watching it as an adult, you just see a giant cookie, whatever. But when I was 8 years old, it was unbelievable. And to come back to the special effects thing, obviously we've kind of got caught up on the idea that it is held up, which it has. But like so many movies that we've gone back and talked about, this movie felt so far ahead of anything I'd ever watched. Like I had never, you've seen films with big sets and stuff, but I'd never seen a movie that had so convincingly sold me on the idea of being shrunk before.
No, simply this is a film, as a child, you see in the cinema, it's going to grab your attention. It's
100%.
Going to capture you. And I appreciate that. I totally understand. If I would have watched it in the cinema, maybe I would have had a different feeling towards it. You said as well, right? You just said about things kids find amazing, the like climbing the Lego, seeing the dinosaur toy, things like that. The thing that I even watching now, but thinking of what is fucking cool as a kid, remote control lawnmower.
Oh yeah, that is pretty dope. That
thing is awesome.
Yeah, it is. Although that kid was a complete bellend.
That kid was a complete and utter bellend. But again, who's the better inventor, Nick?
Or
Wayne? Because Nick, it was hinted that Nick was the one that invented a radio control lawnmower. If they had Robot Wars back then, Nick's winning the whole thing.
That is, if you give Wayne the kind of pass saying, okay, he had a bit of luck with the baseball, but in fairness, he did invent a shrinking machine. I think when history looks back, they will think, okay, I think the shrinking machine is probably a touch more important than the radio-controlled lawnmower. But just about. But that's not underselling Nick's achievement. I think he's done very well there.
Yeah, but again, unless Ron hits a baseball through a window, because baseball is magic, he was still blowing things up.
And the other thing is, at the start of the film, again, it's a very baseball-centric film. There's the baseball hitting the walls. He goes upstairs when he's had that presentation with the evil science guys, and they just clearly aren't having it. He goes up and smashes that machine to bits. Yeah. After they've shrunk the kids, he just smashes the shit out of it. So all of a sudden, he goes back and then, I don't know. Again, the science is bizarre. Nobody reacts naturally because there's just not enough time. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad this film's 90 minutes long, but when the kids get shrunk, they react, they're really cool about it. There's no big deal.
They're so blasé about everything. They're blasé about their kids missing for a minute. Okay, we'll call the police, it's fine. They're blasé then. They're eating breakfast while the kids are in the jungle, apparently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, the parents are super chill about it as well.
So, him as well, he goes up to the attic. His couch is missing, his thinking couch. All right, yeah. There's no, where's that gone? It's just all right, I'm going to smash my machine up. You would have thought instinctively, right, well, my kids are not going to move it downstairs. My wife hasn't been.
My kids are missing.
Yeah.
My couch is not here. There's a shrinking machine at the other end of the room, a broken window, perhaps something's happened and the shrinking has been successful. No, I'm going to smash up the machine. Somebody's stolen the sofa. What the fuck, dude? Where are you going with this? He's an idiot. He is an idiot, which is true of a lot of scientists. They get so caught up in the world that they just become like moronic when it comes to everyday things. And to be honest, it's a bit of an idiot.
The more intellectual you are, the less, I guess, street smart you have.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if that comes under street smarts or just basic common sense, but apparently he wasn't having it. I don't know. Well, I mean, again, like you said, all the way through the film where, once he's aware that his kids have been shrunk, his approach to it is both very unscientific. And I know they show like an element of worry, but I don't think there's any real, like, they're really blasé about it. Like to the point where you say they're eating cereal, which is obviously one of the more memorable sequences in the film. And you talked about how this film could have had a very different ending. Imagine what the ending would have been like if he'd eaten Nick.
His kid.
Not only is he eating his son, but like, oh my God, like your father legitimately ingesting his own son.
At some point, he's going to have to defecate those bones.
Oh my God, it's so disturbing, the potential end of this film. Although all that scene reminds me of is, I'm not sure if you ever played Micro Machines on the Mega Drive. Yep. Like that scene from Micro Machines is clearly taken directly from this film, 100%. Like there's so many Cheerios in the breakfast table level of Micro Machines on the Mega Drive. I
loved about Micro Machines was the cartridge had the extra control ports.
Oh yeah. I know.
Like that was to me. That was the biggest thing ever. Oh my God, you can actually play 4 players. It has control ports in the cartridge. It's like fucking hell.
That game was moving up in the world. Good. That game, and that game's like this film. That game has aged amazingly well.
Legitimately holds up.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. So we pretty much made it to the end of the film, and obviously we've got 2 very alternative endings for people. How this film could have gone. Steve, the imaginary 5th kid, getting killed out in the woods, or Nick gets eaten by his father, which I'm not sure how they deal with that at all. But you don't get a French kiss joke at the end of that film. I can tell you that.
French kiss.
A French kiss. I can't speak it. We're recording so early on Sunday, and it is my fault. I do apologize. So I think that's pretty much it for the film. Do you want to move on to facts? Do you have any facts?
I think I didn't write as many notes as you. I just had basically just Russ and Ron Thompson are both shitebags. So yeah, I can probably.
Do you think Russ? Wait. Are you talking about Russ Senior or Russ Junior?
Russ Senior.
Yeah, Russ Senior. Yeah. Well, like I said, if I go back and watch, I would say the first 20 minutes of this film, and all you'll be thinking is Russ Senior is Jim Carrey.
Oh no, I definitely see it. As you said that, I definitely see it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have anything against Russell Jr. except the fact he looks like fucking Gozer.
See, that's the thing. Like I said, I had the whole Stranger Things stuck in my head, but he does have Gozer hair. There's no choice about it.
Gozer hair, Gozer face. Like, where Gozer had to have white makeup put on, that's just Russ. Russ
he's quite peaky.
Yeah. It's like he's ill all the time.
It is weird going back and rewatching him. Like, why did I find him so cool? Again, I'm trying to kind of get into the head of 7-year-old Liam, but like I get the Amy thing, like, why I had a crush on Amy, but the whole like thinking that Russ was so cool, and I really did think it was cool. I'm not sure why.
Lost Boys thinking Corey Haim dressed cool.
Oh, yeah. But the thing is, I can go on that journey. When you look back, it was just like, yeah, the coat was ridiculous and stuff, but I can understand why I thought he was cool in 1980, whatever the fuck it was released. But I think this is a strange one. I don't think this is aged as well as Corey Haim's performance in Lost Boys, put it that way.
You got a point.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what we got here. For the scene in which miniaturized Nick Zielinski drops into a bowl of Cheerio cereal, a tank was filled with 16,000 gallons of milk-like substance.
Oh, thank God it was milk-like substance. Jesus Christ, that could have been a very disturbing.
Chlorinated water, food thickener, and pigment.
Pigment?
Yeah.
Cheerios, if that's a thing, yeah.
The Cheerios were made from tractor inner tubes, 12 feet in diameter, coated in foam. Like, he is literally swimming in asbestos.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you had to do in 1989 without CG, but it looks so much better for it. Like, that scene, even say, would not look nearly as good in CG. It looks so awesome because he's legitimately swimming in milk inside a giant Cheerio. So it just looks great.
Was put into that. He must have been so proud of it because it's still his IMDb photo. Now, don't get me wrong. He hasn't done anything since Honey, I Shrunk the Audience in 1994.
No, he hasn't. And not many of them have, in fairness, gone on to great things, put it that way.
Yeah. Right. Chevy Chase and John Candy both turned down the role of Wayne Zielinski. Candy did, however, suggest Rick Moranis for the film. This also happened when Moranis was offered Ghostbusters. So Candy just constantly just throwing work Moranis' way.
Well, he's done him some pretty big favors there, giving him two of his largest roles of all time. Who's it? John Candy and
Chevy Chase.
I tell you what, they'd both be great in this film.
Yeah.
You know, Chevy Chase is arguably the dad of the 80s. You know, I think there's an argument for that. I think he'd be, as much as I like Rick Moranis, like Chevy Chase would certainly add more comedy to this film, I think.
But seeing the amount of work that Chevy Chase had, and it's mad because you just always hear stories about how much of a prick he was.
Yeah, but he was so good. Like, that's the thing, though, isn't it? As long as it was like we were talking a few weeks ago about Steven Seagal. Like, he did have that run. He was clearly the biggest bellend in the world, and people were obviously waiting for him to have that failure, because as long as you're having hits, you can get away with being a complete bellend. But there's a reason, maybe in the same way that as huge as Chevy Chase was in the 80s and very early 90s, when he dropped away big time, because all of a sudden, if your films are flopping and you're a dick, people are like, well, I want nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
But if you go back and look at Chevy Chase's IMDb, he had an absolutely unbelievable run in the 80s, and he was legitimately compelling on screen. Everything he was in, he was like the star of. But yeah, as soon as a couple of, misses and you're a dickhead, that's when your career goes down the pan. And yeah, I think that kind of did for Chevy Chase. Although he's made a bit of a comeback with, what was that TV show he's in?
Community.
Yeah, Community.
Although he wasn't in season 5 because he was a dick.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. There you go. People can only put up with him for so long.
Right. You said as well, like, most of them in this film didn't go on to do other things, and it's probably because they all became ill. Sets and props took more than 9 months to build. A May-June 1989 Disney Channel magazine article reported that 12 houses, complete with front and backyards, were built, in addition to a 10-foot-tall oatmeal cookie made from polyurethane foam and real cream filling. So the cream filling sandwiched between polyurethane foam, so that's not good for you.
Probably not.
A 40-foot-tall urethane foam blades of grass, and a giant mechanical ant that required a dozen puppeteers to operate. The ant was constructed using latex foam core, and horsehair, and recreated for stop-motion sequences in which the children rode atop the insect. Like, these kids are coming down with everything.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I'm amazed that they're all not, just dead, if truth be told.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that just making movies in the 80s was just that dangerous, basically.
So, theatrically, there was an animated short, Tummy Trouble. Many credit the success of this film towards audiences wanting to see more of Roger Rabbit. So I'm guessing, I've never heard of Tummy Trouble, but Tummy Trouble was a Roger Rabbit cartoon.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
How we haven't done Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, which is insane. Absolutely insane.
You've already said Matt Frew was 30, which is still fucking insane.
Crazy.
The film's original title, Teeny Weenies.
Oh my God.
Which was rejected on the grounds that it sounded too much like a kiddies film with no appeal to adults.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like you're watching a lot of child.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dodgy.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty dodgy.
Yeah. We said about Joe Johnston, most of his films are like effects laden. So Joe Johnston was a highly respected art director and special effects wizard, but an unproven director with only a student film to his name. When meeting with Jeffrey Katzenberg, he asked him if he was being hired due to that short film. Katzenberg replied, "No, we're hiring you in spite of that film."
Because let's be clear, it doesn't always work out, these moves for special effects guys. Like, the one that always jumps to my mind is something like Aliens versus Predator Requiem. You got like these two guys, they're special effects dudes. They're like, oh, we've got a real passion for and they clearly did, despite that film being horrendous. They clearly had a passion for the source material and all the nods you would hope for. But of course, they just weren't very good directors. Thank fuck, Joe Johnston happened to be a really good, I know we called him competent, which is perhaps understanding it. This was his first film. It's a really well-made film. And I know, we can make arguments as to whether it's, how well it's held up. But as a kid's movie in 1989, absolutely knocked out of the park.
Oh, 100%.
Although, honestly, out of all those facts so far, and I knew you might have a few more to add, just the fact that you mentioned Roger Rabbit and the fact that we haven't done that movie. Like, we've said, this is our 77th podcast and we haven't done Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
It's insane. And the weirdest thing is, it's not even come up in conversation. Like, this might be the first time we've mentioned Roger Rabbit, as in, it's not like one of those films we had in our head, like, oh, we've got to get around to doing Roger Rabbit. I just don't think we've mentioned it until now. And now all of a sudden, like, holy shit, we should do that like next week. We're not going to do it next week, by the way. But soon,
no, I've got a good one for you next week.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
So just two more then. The first one being the success of this film led to Joe Johnston getting the Rocketeer.
Yeah. That didn't do amazingly well, did it, the Rocketeer?
No, it didn't. No, but I
know people like it. But
I was more an adventure kid growing up, and I appreciate they were an adventure in this. But for some reason, the Rocketeer just captured me.
Oh, no, I can totally get that. As I said, it wasn't like I watched it and hated it. But it is strange how some films, especially when you're younger, one will grab you and other ones just simply don't. And The Rocketeer, for one reason or another, I watched it, it was fine. And then I haven't seen it for, 30 years since. Bizarre. Finally,
as well, then, when the cops get back in the car and see a missing children report for Stilinski, I was going to say Stilinski. The previous record for the Stilinski household states 12 counts of disturbing the peace. This is consistent with Big Russ's feelings towards Wayne and his experiments. So I'm going to guess Big Russ is a grass.
Big Russ is a grass, which wasn't cool in 1989. It might be all the rage in 2022. But yeah, being a grass was frowned upon in 1989. But if your neighbor is, and again, as much as Russ Sr. is a bit of a dick, if it was first thing Saturday morning and my next door neighbor was banging and doing all, I'd be pissed too. I'd be like, dude, you fucking waking me up on a Saturday morning with your sign shit? How about you give it a couple of hours? Like, I won't hoover until at least 10 o'clock in the morning on the weekend because I'm considerate that my neighbors might be having a lie-in. Not this fucking Stilinski guy.
Is it like your friend and podcast partner making you wake up early on a Sunday morning to record? Because
it's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. That's chalk and cheese, buddy. I don't know what you're talking about. Move on quickly.
Moving on. Go for it, mate. Soundtrack.
Oh, well, Legacy first.
I'll go for Legacy, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've mentioned so much of the Legacy already. I mean, obviously, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids was a success. I mean, it made $222 million, although a lot of that was put down to the fact that it was released, certainly in America, on the same day as Tim Burton's Batman in 1989. And for those not old enough, to remember, back in the day, you would go to the cinema and you would queue up because obviously you couldn't book the tickets online. And you could phone in, but people didn't really do that. Like, it was a common sight on the weekend to walk past one of the cinemas and there'd be a huge queue coming out of the cinema and down the street, especially for the biggest films. And back in 1989, a lot of people were obviously going to see Tim Burton's Batman, but quite often it was sold out. So when it was sold out, everyone was going to see Honey, I Shrunk the Kids instead. So while I'm sure this film would have been a success irregardless, it did supposedly make a lot of money off the back of Tim Burton's Batman often being sold out, which is an odd one because you usually think, it would have made more if it wasn't released the same weekend as Batman. But in this instance, a lot of people seem to think that it was so popular that people were out anyway. So like, well, we can't see Batman, we might as well go and see this. I mean, that was legitimately the reason I ended up seeing Blade in 1999. I think it was 1998. Yeah. We were out to go and see The Exorcist. And we got to the cinema, we queued up, and by the time we got to the front, The Exorcist was sold out. We're like, well, what else is on? And we saw Blade. And I got to be honest, in 1998, I didn't know anything about it.
No.
And of course,
some might say you made the right choice on that then.
Oh, that is legitimately one of my favorite
how have we not done Blade yet?
I know. And that is legitimately one of my top 5 cinematic experiences of all time because we didn't know what we were going to see. And within 10 minutes, we're watching the nightclub scene. Yeah. And we're watching Wesley Snipes just being the coolest motherfucker on the planet. Wait, how did we not know about this movie? It's the coolest thing. At 16 years old and you see Wesley Snipes looking like that, doing that. And in a film you just knew nothing about. Holy shit, we lost our fucking minds. Anyway, this isn't a Blade podcast. But again, another movie we really need to do very soon. But yes, to bring it back to the fact that you've only seen this movie once, there was obviously a relatively large-scale sequel, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Jokes there, is it? Large-scale sequel?
Yeah, that was unintentional. There's Honey, I Shrunk Ourselves, which was a direct-to-video, but oddly the only character to return for the straight-to-DVD trilogy cap, or whatever you want to call it, was Rick Moranis of all people.
Yes, the only actor.
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
still had Diane and stuff. Yeah.
Which is bizarre that he would be the only one to return. It's kind of like, if you had like a Dusk Till Dawn, if you made Dusk Till Dawn 3 straight to DVD, and the only person who came back was George Clooney. I don't know, I can't get my head around it. But yeah, there was also a TV show from 97 to 99. There were 66 episodes of that. I knew nothing about it, despite the fact that I love this movie. And yet you've seen all of it.
Well, yeah, because I had a chip cable box back in the day, and
that's no excuse.
Yeah. And you watch it used to be on I think it was like midnight, the last thing they had on the Disney Channel before Disney Channel shut off.
Oh my God. It's so bizarre that you have no real attachment to this film, and yet you've seen all the sequel and all of the TV show. That is bananas.
Yeah, but you say attachment. You've watched one. You have I don't know what it is. You watch one, you watch the others.
It's weird because I look at it, I'm just like, it's not going to be as good. The only one I've watched is the other one that went to the cinema, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. And I was immediately like, the magic is gone. Or maybe, again, it speaks to that whole, I was just that little bit older and I just wasn't interested in the same way. Like, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And it shouldn't be Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, should it? It should be Honey, I Shrank the Kids.
Shrank the Kids, yeah.
Yeah, it's grammatically incorrect.
They were given a dunce award by the Institute of Language, whatever. But a Disney executive said, no, it's intentional because it's something, it references some line in the film.
Yeah.
So they knew that they got it wrong because moving on to legacy and all that, as you're already talking about, the sequel, the sequel that's coming out soon is called Shrunk.
Yes, Shrunk. Yeah. So they're sticking with it. But I love the fact, anyway, with the title, like the whole movie is predicated on having to tell one's wife, which I think is absolutely perfect. Like, this is a kid's film, but that's such an adult thing. It's like, I've just shrunk the kids. And rather than thinking, oh my God, I've shrunk my kids and they might die, the first thought into his head is like, oh shit, I've got to tell my wife. Like, honestly, that'd be the first thing. Oh my God, what the hell's my wife's going to kill me?
Can we go back quickly to the TV show? Nick Zielinski, the kid, was played by John Connor from the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Well, that's the thing. Everyone knew Nick would. Again, it leads back to that idea that Nick is the true MVP of this movie. Because in the Legacy sequel that's due to come direct, I think it is actually due to get a cinematic release rather than going directly to Disney+.
Yeah.
Josh Gad is playing the grown-up version of Nick. So it's like they all know it. Yeah. Like, Nick's the one. Like, he's the character. And of course, like, Rick Moranis is the face of the series. There's no two ways about it. But in terms of, like, the most memorable character, I think it probably is Nick. And I think it's a smart choice for them to go back to the idea. And of course, it makes sense from a narrative perspective for Nick to be the grown-up scientist now, and he's going to end up shrinking, I don't know, himself, his dad, whatever it might be. But I'm willing to go on that journey, and I'm just glad to hear that both Rick Moranis is back for it, and more importantly, that it's getting a cinematic release.
Yeah,
which suggests that they have real confidence in this film. Because, let's be clear, this deserves the big budget treatment. It's been proven with the TV show, with the sequels and stuff. This film doesn't work unless it is cutting edge. Like, that was as much as, like, the directorial style, the kids and stuff. The big selling point was the fact that it was so cutting edge, and I think you need to maintain that even in 2023 or 4, whatever it's due to be released. But speaking of, like, the other thing is, and I'm not sure, you did mention the fact that there was the Disney show, as well. Honey, I Shrunk the Audience.
Honey, I Shrunk the Audience. Yeah, it was a ride, wasn't it?
It was a ride, and it was there for many years, but you know what it was replaced by? Michael Jackson's Captain EO, which was a 3D mini-movie for a number of years, which ran until, like, quite late, considering what, the stories of Michael Jackson. But it was written by George Lucas and directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Like, they were all in on Michael Jackson. Again, just a reminder of just how popular Michael Jackson was. But that ride ran right through into, like, the late 90s, maybe even the early 2000s, I think. So, Honey, I Shrunk the Audience was at all the major Disney parks all around the world. So it was at Tokyo, Paris, Florida, California, the full works. But, it got completely replaced by Captain EO, a show where, and, even the stuff I didn't get to go to, because I always wanted to go to the Disney parks, and I didn't get to go to Disney in Florida until I was like an adult. So I didn't go until I was like 26, 27, I think. And I went to Disney Tokyo in like my mid-30s. But even the stuff which had already gone, I knew most of the shows because it was stuff I knew I wanted to go to, like the Back to the Future ride and stuff like that. And the fact that the Universal, they used to have an Aliens ride, which they replaced with a god-awful Men in Black ride. But I never knew about Captain EO, which again is strange because I was such a massive Michael Jackson.
I've never heard of it. No, I've never. Obviously, I've heard of like the Jaws ride, the Terminator, the T2 one. I knew about
I was still there when I went.
But I've never heard of Michael Jackson's Captain EO or whatever it was.
Yeah, Captain EO of all things. But I think that's pretty much it. The legacy. And
just one more thing I wanted to mention.
Oh yeah,
really
go for
quickly.
it.
Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves. Mila Kunis was in it.
Is she in it?
Yeah.
Oh god, I don't think I ever saw that. That was the straight. That was the third one, wasn't it?
That was the straight. The straight to DVD one, which was what the fuck's his name? Rick Moranis's last ever live action film.
Yeah, which is insane because that would have been like 97, I think.
97, yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Anything else on Legacy?
Not for me, no.
In terms of score, soundtrack, all that jazz. The two that really, I mean, the soundtrack, sorry, the score, I do apologize, it's by James Horner, and like this guy has done 1,000,001 absolutely massive films: Braveheart, Titanic, Apollo 13, Avatar, Field of Dreams, another film we need to do, Wrath of Khan, another film we absolutely have to do, especially the fact that you haven't seen Wrath of Khan. I'm going to take a breath in just a moment.
All right, calm down.
But I thought the score in this film is fantastic. Like, it captures the mood perfectly. None more so than you could make an argument overused, but I love the main theme. I absolutely adore the main theme to this film.
The animated title sequence at the beginning with the theme is fantastic.
Oh, it's fantastic. That was another thing from like the late 80s, early 90s. A lot of movies used to have those kind of low-key animated introductions.
Yeah.
Loads of films used to do that, and then it just disappeared. But yeah, to bring it back to the score, that theme tune in particular has lived long in the memory. So I think, again, it captures the mood perfectly. The theme tune is totally catchy, totally humble. So I think he's done an absolutely fantastic job. But the thing that really stands out to me is, and probably because I had a massive crush on her, is Turn It Up by Nick Cayman when Amy's doing the mop dance. And that's what is literally referred to online, is Amy's mop dance. So yeah, Turn It Up. That's what I really remember from this film. That and the main thing. But in terms of music in this film, it's all getting knocked out of the park all over the place. In terms of video games, we did mention Micro Machines, which is an obvious one. Yeah. But I mean, they basically made. I mean, first and foremost, it was amazing that there wasn't an actual tie-in. There was no Honey, I Shrunk the Kids movie tie-in. So there was nothing on the...
Something that, like, for the 90s, I wonder if it's because it was a Disney property, but you would expect something like this to have a video game release because, fucking hell, it was ripe for it.
Yeah, 1989, you'd like just... in 1989, this should have been on the NES. It should have been on the Mega Drive. It should have subsequently been on the Super NES, which wasn't out by then, but you'd think, would have had kind of, I don't know, it was still popular 2 years later. Surely it could have released something. I think, like, I was legitimately flabbergasted because it's only when I was going back and doing the research, I was like, for someone who was pretty big into video games and, I'd like to think I know my stuff to a certain extent, I was like, I just can't think of a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids video game. But even then I was like, there has to be a Game Boy version or something. But no, nothing, which is insane. But now, even though it's not called Honey, I Shrunk the Kid, Grounded by Obsidian Entertainment is just Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. The only difference is it's Rob's version because you can die in this.
Yeah. I literally got Grounded on my phone. I was ready to talk about Grounded.
yeah. Well, I mean, I've played it and it 100% is Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but with the genuine fear of death because it's got like low-key survival stuff. Yeah. I played it for like a couple of hours. I died like 7 times. So yeah, you do. Obviously, that's not just it. You don't have like a funeral and all that jazz. You just kind of respawn, so everything's fine. But yeah, it is the slightly darker version of the Honey, I Shrunk the Universe. Honey, I Shrunk the Universe, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids universe. I do apologize.
Speaking of as well, do you think...
And Grounded's great.
Do you think, because you just said that as well, that you can die multiple times and things like that, do you think there should have been more danger? Like, I'm sorry, you don't come across 2 bugs in a back garden like that, or 3 with the bumblebee.
Well, it's strange because even their approach to it, like, again, the fact that they make them so gross, like they don't cute them up. and like immediately they're like, "Oh, that ant is mine," or whatever they say, and they jump on the ant.
Yeah.
Like if you saw an ant 8 times bigger than you, you're like, and he's got those like fucking pincers at the front. You wouldn't go anywhere near it. If you saw
you wouldn't put your fucking hand near it and feed him some cookie.
I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, like I said, they kind of, what they do to make him cute, they kind of make him purr, don't they? Like he makes that cute sound. But yeah, again, they're very, well, it all leads into this idea that they're very blasé about being shrunk. They're like, oh, we're shrunk. Let's just get on with our day. Like, Jesus Christ, guys. I don't think you realize what a big deal this is and how much danger we're in.
We'll get home, we'll get big, and we'll go to the mall. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Be fine. Yeah. And I'll bag off with Amy again or whatever. Oh, bag off. I don't even like saying it. Jesus Christ. What was the other one you said in Newport? Bog off or
cob
off. They're all gross. But then it's what you used to like. We're saying cop off now. I'm like, dude, that just sounds gross.
Yeah,
copping off. It just sounds far too like that's what Russ was doing. In fairness, I think he was copping off, aggressively kissing.
It doesn't do us justice.
It really doesn't. Gross. French kissing is an actually much nicer term.
Yeah.
So obviously we weren't using it. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
We've missed a big section.
Have we? Oh, love and hate.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I don't think I wrote anything down.
No, I didn't have anything written down. But I was thinking we've missed something.
Well, okay, if I was going to do it quickly off the top of my head, in terms of loves, the physical effects have aged so well. It sounds odd saying this isn't love because she was a kid, but I did love Amy when I was younger, and I do think she's great in this film. And I do love the fact that she truly is representative of the girl next door. Yeah. As in, she was like hot, but she wasn't super hot. Like I said, you were like, oh, Amy could legitimately live next door to me. And I love... what's his name's performance? Russ Senior's performance in this film. I know you're not so fussed on him, but the fact that like he's clearly the progenitor. I spoke about the fact that Russ Jr. is the progenitor for Steve in Strange Things. I mean, I think he is legitimately the progenitor for the entirety of Jim Carrey's career before he kind of went a bit too big. It's kind of like Jim Carrey, but Jim Carrey not turned up to 10. You know, like usually, like when you think of Jim Carrey, like I know people have a lot of time for like Ace Ventura, but mostly I like him sitting at like a 7. As soon as he turns it up too high, it can become a bit much. Yeah. But I think his performance in this film is really, really good. I keep saying him. It's very unfair. What is his name? I'm going to get it now. Matt Frewer. I do apologize. Yeah, so I'm going to say Matt Frewer, Amy, and again, her name is both Amy in real life and in this film, and the special effects.
So for me, the special effects, definitely. Nick Zielinski. I'm sorry, I don't know his name in.
Oh yeah, shit! How have I not put Nick on that list?
Because Nick is great.
You are right. Nick's definitely got to be on the list.
And the introduction of a Lego, because I'm a Lego fan, and you would find little Legos. If I was shrunk, you would find Legos all over the place.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Yeah, that's a good shout. In terms of hates, as great as the special effects are for the most part, there's no two ways that the stuff with the miniatures does take you out of the movie slightly. That's what ages the movie more than anything. Number two, the fact that nobody's really that fussed about the fact that they've just been miniaturized. And of course, as we mentioned, Wayne Sielinski's lack of, going straight to human trial. Like that's just absolutely bonkers. And the cap wearing of Russ Senior and whatever his name is. Ron. I keep getting Ron, yeah. I both don't. Ron's quite annoying, full stop. But Ron and Russ's cap wearing really gets on my tits, if truth be told. So they're going to be my 3 hates.
So my first hate is Ron. I think that kid's.
It's fair enough. Yeah, he's the worst thing in this film for sure. The fact that he also happens to be wearing that fucking cap, Jesus Christ, Ron.
Secondly, the fact that baseball fixed everything. It's like they've run out of ideas and they just like, all right, we won't explain it. The baseball is what makes things shrink.
It's a magic baseball, that's for sure.
It really is. It's fucking insane how easy they were just like, all right, baseball, fine. It's like
again though, but that kind of leads into what we love about this film, and neither of us mentioned it, but I think both of us really appreciate that this film is 90 minutes long. So there's no time for science. There's no time for caring. It was a baseball. The kids are tiny. Who gives a fuck? Let's get on with our day because we have only got 90 minutes to fit in all these characters and all this narrative. So.
It's the same with Honey, I Blew Up the Kid Mind because it's the bottom part of a Coke bottle is what helps them.
Let's be honest, Wayne he's a very lucky man in many respects. His wife is too hot for him. His son Nick is too good for him. He clearly can only do he can't get these projects over the line. It's pure luck that these things work. Unbelievable.
My last one, in regards to plot devices, just to move it on quicker, the other thing I hated was, we'll get Quark to get us up these stairs.
Oh, so you just hate movie dogs. You just hate movie dogs, dude. That's what that is. Unbelievable. Well, I'd like to bring it around to like the scores and recommendations. This is going to be a really interesting one because I thought you'd maybe like this film more, and it's almost I'll be interested to see if this is the kind of film you'll show to your son Riley when he's a few years older, and how he would react to it if you know if you watched this at like 6 or 7 years old. But in terms of those who kind of grew up with it, I would encourage them to like rewatch it because I think it's held up relatively well. I think, again, I'm not saying I would rush out and tell my 40-year-old friends if they hadn't watched it to go out and watch it. And I think it's the same reason like you have an issue with it. Like, you know, the fact that you don't have that nostalgic attachment to it and you're like, it's fine, whatever. But, you know, if somebody had kids and they're like, I'm looking for a movie to watch with my kids, I still think this film holds up in that regard. Yeah. You know, if I had kids and they were like 7, 8 years old, this would be on the list of films I'd want to show them. So, yeah, I would recommend it in certain circumstances. And personally, I still think this is a 4-star film. I don't think it's, you know, a perfect film by any stretch, but as a kid's film, I think it's super successful. It's not necessarily, like I said, a film I'm telling my 40-year-old friends to go out and watch, but as a kid's movie, in terms of achieving its goal, I still think it knocks it out of the park, and I still think it looks great. So, yeah, 4 stars and a admittedly limited recommendation.
It's interesting you say that because I was thinking the same thing as I watched it, like about recommendations and stuff. And it's definitely one I would get my son to watch when he gets a bit older to understand it. At the moment, we're into PJ Masks and Paw Patrol, so we're not really moving on to things like this. Yeah.
There's a couple of years yet.
Yeah. But if I'm going to subject him to, and I am going to subject him to Garbage Pail Kids, Mario Brothers, Howard the Duck. If I'm going to subject him to that, I've got to get him into other things as well. Oh, mate, if I watch these things as a kid, he's watching these fucking things as a kid. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right. I mean, if you're making him watch those films, the least you could do is allow him to watch this film. But like you said, he's still a bit too young because you don't want to be explaining bagging off, copping off, and cobbing on, or whatever the fuck it is they say in Newport. We need to give him a couple of years before you have that chat. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I agree with you, definitely. For people with kids, it's probably a good ride. It's definitely a recommendation for them. For people my age, not so much, as you've already said.
I think it is purely a nostalgic thing.
Yeah, and in regards to giving it a rating, it's a 3. It's
fair enough.
It's middle of the road. It's not great. It's not terrible. The effects save it, in my opinion. So, yeah, it's a 3 all the way for me.
Honestly, I feel like I'm throwing this in just because I feel like I should. My wife, I had a chat with her after this film, and I said that you had grown up and you hadn't watched it. You know, it wasn't as big a deal with you and your friends or whatever. And I was like, I bet for that reason, I was like, I bet money that you give this film a 3. And I was just like, for that, because I feel like I'd feel the exact same way if I hadn't kind of grown up with it. And I can't, I'm trying to remove my nostalgia from it. As I said, I still think it's a very effective film, but just because it's not necessarily effective in the same way to me as a 4-year-old doesn't mean that it's still not a great film for 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. And I suspect that if you did show it to a kid nowadays, they'd still probably enjoy it, especially kids nowadays with their fucking ADD. It's like, it's 90 minutes long. And, it's exciting. And most of it holds up, bar the Mitch, as we talked about. So yeah, as I said, in terms of recommendations, perhaps if you have fond memories of this film, you can probably leave them in the past. But if you have kids, they'll probably still enjoy it. So why not? As for next week, I suspect, based on your tone, that this is going to be one of our more interesting choices.
Yeah, it is. So, Mr. Glenn Lash, guess what we found? Now, Glenn Lash is a listener who has asked us many times to review Cat People. And we have found Cat People in the UK. So we're going to review that. Now, what's interesting is, on IMDb, it's pretty much rated the same as Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's got a cast I have, couldn't believe is in this film. Malcolm McDowell, John Hurd, Annette O'Toole, Ed Begley Jr. A soundtrack or songs by David Bowie.
I know. So, it's insane. And I'd legitimately never heard of this film. And that's why I was more shocked when I looked back and I was like, watching the trailer, I was like, wait, David Bowie's doing the soundtrack? And then you see the cast, you're like, holy shit, that's a really famous cast. And you realize it's a remake, all these things. And perhaps the rest of the world or other people listening to this podcast are like, oh, of course, Cat People from 1982. Never even heard of it.
No. So I'm really looking, like, I do love a legitimate, just out of nowhere film like this. So I am really looking forward to watching this.
An erotic cat thriller. Yeah, this is going to be interesting.
Whether it's good, which is subjective, whether it's bad, it's going to be interesting. I'm smiling thinking about it. I'm thinking,
well, it does have, okay, like you said, it's like, make no mistake, that's going to be the only comparison we'll be making between Cat People and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it is apparently pretty well thought of. You know, the reviews aren't bad, and obviously at some point it's turned into something of a cult film, but it's one that had completely avoided my radar. So yes, Cat People, I don't know. We'll find out next week. So please, I mean, you know, if you want to hear us talk about a real, you know, this is going to be the deepest of deep cuts, or perhaps you're already a massive cat, you know, I love cats, but I don't know cat people.
Well, if I'm not a fan of, as you've already said, dogs on screen, what am I going to be like with cat people on screen?
God
I guess
knows.
we'll wait and see.
Let's be clear. We are the only podcast on planet Earth going from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids to cat people. I can assure you of that. Yeah. If anything sets us aside from the rest of the podcasting community, it's our ability to go from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids to cat people. So yeah, join us for cat people.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids to cat people. We have no linear direction. No. It's all over the shop.
There's no connection whatsoever, other than they were kind of vaguely released 20 to 40 years ago. That's about it.
Yes.
That's the only thing that connects them. That, and apparently their IMDb score. I bet you My Cousin Vinny had a relatively similar IMDb score as well.
Yeah,
I think what are they all about? 6.7?
So 6.2 for Cat People, 6.4 for
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
I'm guessing slightly higher for My Cousin Vinny, 6.8.
7.6.
Oh, so we've underestimated.
To be fair, mind, that extra 1.4 was probably because of Marissa Tomei.
It probably was because of Marissa Tomei. I see we're even sneaking her into other podcasts now. I love from Marissa Tomei. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But yes, this has been the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids podcast, apparently. And amazingly, next week, we're doing Cat People. You can find it online. It is worth looking into. Please give it a watch and please join us next week. But I can't believe I'm saying it, for 1982's Cat People. But as always, thanks for listening, guys. Catch you soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one. Bye now.
So where can people actually find us?
Oh, well, people can actually find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. You can also drop us an email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. We like to read them out on the show, so please feel free to send them in. Any recommendations, just get in touch with us. We do like that. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing.
Cheers, Darry. And a big thank you to Alexander Ortolan for the awesome intro music. He has no media presence as far as I can tell. He's very mysterious, but makes great music. So thank you very much.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Hey, you guys!